Vasudevendra yogendram natva jnana pradam gurum mumukshunam hitarthaya Tattvabodho bhidiyate. Yeah, I'm so happy that Carrie indeed has asked and demonstrated very rightly what Vedanta means. It's having a conversation and asking questions. This is always such a beautiful thing to experience. You know, the greatest gift that you can give to a teacher is to live this knowledge, to transform your life with this knowledge, and to ask them questions. Right? It's not giving, okay, that's also okay, giving gifts and all this, and giving food, and this is all part of the tradition, but it's really seeing that when you speak, what comes through your words is those very teachings, the very style and the manners and the vision, as is being said in the class. There's no greater gift than this, right? And the teacher hears you and they say, wow, this person is feeding back to me what I have been speaking of, because the teacher represents the scriptures represent the tradition represents this long, right, lineage of intelligent human beings who have spent their whole lives refining this knowledge to help you, right, to better your life. And so it's always, right, it's always just, are you living it? Are you speaking it? Are you saying it? Are your words enveloped consciously? Is there a sense of deliberation in your words when you speak? Is it just kind of rapid fire, right? Or is there slow down and you're thinking, reflecting, is this consistent with what I know? Is it timely? Is it educated? Is it well thought of? Have I thought about this before? Right. So this is a deliberation. We go from the four types of thinking. We go from impulsive. Now, impulsive kind of thinking has its place because it's necessary to sometimes think impulsively. If you want to cross the street and the car's coming, there's no time to analyze that. You just need to impulsively move backwards. So it's a survival mechanism. So impulsive thinking has its place. But then more so than impulsive, then one goes through kind of, looking at where is this impulsivity hurting me? Where is it helping me? And where is it hurting me? And where is it not quite aligned with the values that, that the Bhagavad Gita speaks of, for example, such as straightforwardness. Is my speech and my words, is it aligned? Is my speech and my actions aligned? I was just saying this to Julie, right? When in Australia, what do we have this culture? We say, hey, see you later, right? So I say one thing, but do I really mean it? Am I going to follow up seeing you later? No, right? But we just say it unconsciously. Hey, see you later, right? And so it kind of becomes a normal mode of communicating, and it spills over into other areas of your life. You say, well, I'm going to listen, but then you don't follow up, right? You see how there's a connection there? See you later, but then you don't follow up. And then when it comes to the knowledge, you say, well, I'm going to listen to this and I'm going to think about this, but then I do the same thing as I do with see you later. I don't follow up. See, Vedanta is not just Brahma Vidya. Last week we discussed Brahma Vidya, that's self-knowledge, but it's also Yoga Shastra. It's how to make the right intelligent decisions and move from this impulsivity to a more deliberate mode, to a more deliberate way of speaking, a more deliberate way of thinking, slowing down a little bit and taking the time to think what you're saying instead of just saying it. Okay, so we've spoken about sat and chit, and we're now at the crux of this whole teaching, these two words, sat and chit. And we said that sat is existence, and it is the now when we speak of existence, right, you cannot think of anything outside time and space, right? Everything's within time and everything's accommodated by space. This is a fact. In fact, what is the universe? The universe is, what is this jagat? It's time, space, and all objects within time and space.
If you take this word sat, then we said that time, we use the word time to kind of look into time. And we said that not only is every moment of time existent, right? 1 hour is existent, 1 second is existent, 1 minute is existent, but also, right, on top of this existent units of time, there is a presence. There is a presence in whose presence there is this analysis of time. There's an experience of different units of time. And as we use that example of dating versus doing something that you don't really want to do. So the time is different, but it's still, right, on top of, it's still depending on this common substratum of existence, the I am. So we saw that time exists, and also the substratum is there too. So now, if you just take this alone and you say, well, everything is in time and everything depends on time, then you don't even have to analyze objects, because if time alone exists and it depends on this common existence, then if everything else exists in time, then also every object has the same nature to it as time itself. Then there is space. So we haven't covered this, but let's look at space. Now, space is exactly the same as time, because space you can divide, right? You can take a meter and then you can say, well, meter can be divided into smaller parts, right? It can be divided into inches or centimeters, right? It depends, doesn't matter. And then the centimeter can be in 10 millimeters, and then millimeters can be, right, smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller units until you go to Planck length. Last week we did Planck time, right? And now we can do Planck length. So, right, whatever the number is, it's just the smallest measurement between, right, two points. So now, when you think of space, right, some people kind of have this issue understanding what is space. The easiest ways to understand space is just take 2 points, and the distance between 2 points, that's space, which is really interesting, because if you mention space to some people, they will think you're speaking of outer space, right? And even space is very hard to grasp. I mean, it's kind of maybe strange to you, but to a lot of people, the concept of space, it's another object that they try to objectify outside the Earth's atmosphere. So now if consciousness is even subtler than space, and I've got trouble kind of cognizing space, I've got trouble, right? I have a tendency to objectify space, and consciousness is even subtler than space, then you can imagine, see how subtle of a mind you need for Vedanta. I mean, this is why a lot of people are not so, right? You know, we say, right, adhikari, there's a certain readiness to this. Otherwise, a person comes and they're relating to all these solid objects, right? Yeah, fire, I can imagine earth, I can imagine air, and even air is a little bit hard to, visualize unless you give it some color, some gaseous color. And then you go into something subtle like space, and you go, whoa, space, what do you mean space, right? Already the mind's got some problems cognizing that, right? So you need this specific mind to, to appreciate awareness and existence. So going back to space, so the point is, look at this. You say, well, why? Okay, what is there to gain by knowing that space can be divided into smaller units? We're not analyzing space. We don't care about dividing space into smaller units. The point is, whatever can be divided. Okay, now show me one thing that you cannot divide. Look at this. You can even divide your thoughts, right? Okay, look at this. Just imagine an elephant, and the back section of the elephant is gray, okay? Now imagine a gray back section of the elephant. And now imagine the forward section of the elephant is a giraffe. So it's a half elephant, half giraffe. Okay, so half gray and half orange with spots. Okay, you see what you just did? You just split the thought. Now, please take away the giraffe and just imagine half of the elephant. Half of the elephant. Yeah, you see? Exactly. So even a thought you can split, but I want you to do this. And you're going to get a big prize for this. I want you to split your awareness right now. Just like an elephant, I want you to split your awareness in half. Don't split your awareness in reference to an object. I didn't say object, I said your awareness. Try as hard as you wish. You can't split your awareness. You can even split the concept of space. In fact, in space, you got just to be in deep sleep, right? There's an absence of space in reference to deep sleep. So in that sense, I've split space. In a sense of a dream space is very different than, right, this waking space. So in that sense, once again, I've manipulated space, but I want you to manipulate your awareness. Impossible. Not possible, okay? So this is the point. We're just trying to show you what is it that is manipulatable, what is it that can be altered, what is it that can be changed, what is it that you can play around in your mind. You can play around with anything. I give you a mathematical equation of anything, of an atom, of the smallest particle of space, right? General theory of relativity. The whole thing was about how space can be bent. And this was Einstein's. He was not into Vedanta. He was just using his rational mind to show how space can be bent, right? So he was doing this. We're doing it. We're talking about space. We know about space, right? So this is the point, to show you that there's only one reality that you cannot manipulate. There's only one reality that you are helplessly that you're helplessly constantly that, and that is this awareness. Then we said chit. Chit is, see, then the question comes is this existence? What kind of existence is it? Is it inert existence? Is it a dead existence? No, the existence is consciousness. Right now, our understanding of this consciousness is an individual consciousness, right? An individual knower. You know, how many times have you like looked up online and you saw a scientific paper, a research paper, and they're trying to quantify consciousness, right? They say it's a product of brain cells, and they say it's a product of the mind. And, you know, neuroscientists are kind of very, you know, adamant about wanting to discover consciousness, and they want to, maybe it's in the, it's in the pineal gland. And so, right, and they say one day we will sort of, you know, pinpoint this. And I'm really, you know, I'm always surprised, you know, how professional they are, and how, you know, they're really, you know, characters, intelligent characters. And there's a whole scientific community about this. And they're speaking about consciousness like an object, like it's just another thing, and it's just totally acceptable. Everyone's contributing to that conversation. The point is, they don't know what consciousness is, and yet they're still curious about consciousness. Look at this. So this means I don't know what consciousness is totally. I don't know what it is totally, and yet I still know there is consciousness. Look at that. Just like we did that example with Gayatri last week, right? Right. I say she's conscious, but I was not referring to consciousness because, you know, I cannot objectify it, but I still know she enjoys consciousness. Now, everyone knows this. You don't have to be a Vedantin to know this. Every person will say to another person, you enjoy consciousness. You're a conscious being. So this means that every person already understands consciousness, but what's the problem? It's not full understanding, right? It's got some falsities to it, and that needs to be corrected. So all Vedanta does is it acknowledges what you already know. It's not a belief system. It's not like I say, hey, you are booga wooga luga. Did you know that? And you're like, yeah, wow, right? And then I tell you, believe it. This is not what it is. We're just pointing out what your experience already is, and then clarifying to make sure that it's keeping in touch with what is. Because that's the problem. I know consciousness, but it's not aligned with what is. It's out of alignment with what is. So we just simply bring it in alignment like that. Okay. So we said that this consciousness typically is considered this individual knower, right? This, you know, in Vedanta, they call it this reflected consciousness, right? But a better word, right, is instead of that, as though confined, right? As though confined consciousness, just like I said with the cup, right? The space is everywhere. Now, from the standpoint of inside the cup, it's as though confined, yeah? Is the space really confined inside the cup? Okay, look at this. Okay, a trick question. What if I close the cup? Is the space confined now? Because some will actually throw this objection, right? No, what's actually confined? The air. The air is confined. Suppose you say, no, you confine space. I confine space. So this means if I now move this cup from here to here, then over here, right, where this cup originally was, should not be allowed to accommodate my hand anymore. So I want to move my hand and I'm right? I can't move my hand because I need to what? Pour back the space, and only now I can move my hand there. You see that? So in other words, just the fact that I can move this and still space is that which accommodates, I can still have my hand accommodated, means the space was not stolen. It was not hijacked by the cup. The space was exactly as it is. And consciousness is exactly the same, right? See, this is incredible. When we speak about Maya, Maya reverses your experience. Right now, you think that I am here, right? Look at this. I am here, right? I'm actually where? I'm actually over here, right? But why does it feel like I'm over here? When I say I am, right? When I say I am, the I am is over here or also. But it feels like the I am is over here. This is due to reversal process. So when I move, see, when I say I am now, and I'm still going to say I am now, it's the same I am. I was already there all along, but it feels like I am contained inside this body. This is due to this power of Maya. It reverses the role. I'm everywhere. So it feels like I'm walking, I am walking, and now I'm over here, and now I'm over here, but I'm already over there. So whatever I am, the I am belongs to everywhere. You understand? The I am is already everywhere, but it feels like I am is always contained within one single body. Okay? So this is very important to understand how you get tricked, right? And then we buy into this experience that I am moving. I am moving my whole life. You have not moved 1 millimeter ever. We said this consciousness obtains in 3 different degrees, and it obtains the truth of this knower, right, of this subject called Andre, called Mina, called David, called Param, called Arkiri, right? That's a knower, we said. When the mind grows in consciousness, when it appears in consciousness, from the standpoint of that one mind, we call that a knower, right? The I sense. So, but the truth of this I sense is nothing but, right, existence, right? It exists. The I sense exists. But we also said that whatever exists also enjoys consciousness. You cannot think of sat without chit, right? Wherever there is existence, there's exactly where the right consciousness is. So the knower, right, exists and also enjoys consciousness, right? The mind is pervaded by consciousness, and the mind is also an object, right? Did you create your brain? Did you create your brain? You didn't create your brain. What created your brain? The intelligence. And therefore the knower, right? The object. If you look any object, don't have to look outside, just look at your own brain. It's a highly complex organism, gray matter. It's able to, regenerate. It's able to, it goes through aging, and it goes through aging through a certain order. It doesn't just sort of age unpredictably. It ages predictably. It takes up most of the oxygen. It has 2 hemispheres, and they're used for different parts of your body. All of this, right, is implying incredible amount of intelligence to create the human brain. Incredible amount of intelligence. We can't do it. You put all minds together in this world, and let's create a brain. We can't do it. So this means that if the intelligence is inside my brain right now, right? What's moving your brain cell, right? Those electrical impulses from one part of the brain to the other. If I say 1 + 1 =, and you answer 2. Now it's so simple, But how many complex operations went inside your brain? Did you do any of that? None. It all happened by itself. You didn't command your electrical impulse to move from one part of the brain to the other. You didn't do that. It happened on its own. And it accessed just the right prefrontal cortex. It didn't access the amygdala. The amygdala is the survival. It accessed the right part of the brain, the front of the brain, because that's where the analysis happens. It didn't go into, oh, I need to survive because I need to calculate what 1 + 1 is. It didn't do that. It happened on its own. So wherever there's this complexity of an organism, it implies there is the presence of intelligence all the time, because your brain's constantly replenishing, regenerating. Your cells are constantly regenerating back to their original condition. I have a little cut here. Just go cut. What happens? Do you go, okay, hold on. Let me just find the right buttons and direct all of the processes to create a crust and prevent further infection. Do you do any of that? It's automatic. Automatically, just one little cut. Automatically, this intelligence goes into action and does exactly what it needs to do to preserve and restore this back to the original condition. How can you deny the presence of intelligence here? It's impossible. Okay, therefore, the object also enjoys consciousness in reference to the knowledge that is making that material what it is. To make a material like a lithium or a carbon or a or whatever atom, to make that atom and to sustain that atom implies there's a constant presence of intelligence. It's not like the intelligence creates the atom once and then goes away. This is called religion, right? With all the respect to religion, right? God creates the world and he goes away and then he leaves it there. How can you say that intelligence goes away when intelligence is preserving, right? Every day there's, right, complex, right? You get hurt today, it's going to replenish itself. You get tomorrow hurt, it's going to replenish itself. You get hurt in 5 days from now, it's going to replenish itself. So this means there's always intelligence, not just one-off. It's always true.
So intelligence and awareness and consciousness are all related, isn't it? It is always there and then.
Yeah, okay. This is a good question. So from the standpoint of the manifest world, that's true. Intelligence, if there's two things that are always true, right? It's intelligence, not always true, but there are true more so than anything else. It is intelligence and consciousness, right? However, Nitin, even intelligence, right, itself has dependent reality, because we said, right, that intelligence exists, so it depends on existence, and it has to kind of operate within a conscious being, right? You cannot build a house, you cannot use your knowledge unless you're conscious, right? You can, if you go into a coma right now, no matter what you know, all of that knowledge will be useless, right? So you need to kind of be conscious and make use of your knowledge. So out of this, right, intelligence, that holds things together, that makes things what they are, that connects the relationship between things, right? Between the sun and the ozone layer, right? Why is the ozone layer at a certain strength? Because if it was 5% less, then you could not go outside. You would be burnt, and therefore you could not conduct your affairs, right, with the world. So it has to be just the right strength, the ozone layer, as to protect the living forms from exposure to radiation and sunburn, right? So in other words, the connection between the ozone layer, the connection between the human being, the connection with the sun, and connection with the cloud, and connection with, as I said, the water and the food chain, right? All of that has to then thus be coming from the same intelligence. Because if it's all related, right, it has to be coming from the same intelligence, right? The intelligence has to know about your body, has to know about the weather, the 4 seasons, right? Has to know about the ozone layer, has to know the distance between the sun and the earth, right? A little bit further, it's too cold, a little bit too close, it's too hot, right? It has to know about the right amount of gravity. If the gravity is too strong, then, it's going to change everything. If it's too weak, then, right, then you can sort of get into trouble like that. right? So you got to think about all of this relationships. This is mind-boggling, the amount of relationships that are all working together to create a life that is sustainable, a life that is in which you can participate and make and help yourself, right? So this intelligence is true. That is a fact. It's true. But it's only true in reference to, or is dependent upon, sat and chit, okay? And as it was seen, Nitin, even this intelligence goes into a resolution, okay? Because it's only true while there is a creation, okay? So creation also goes through cycles, the universe. Big Bang resolutes, Big Bang resolutes, Big Bang, like this from beginningless time. So when the Big Bang, right, before the Big Bang, where is this intelligence? We call this, yeah, it's there, but in potential, okay? In potential. Just like when you go to deep sleep, there is one nirvikalpam atma, there is one undivided you, right, in deep sleep. And in you, right, there is a potential to create a dream world. In you, there is a potential to create a complex world of mountains and people and language and interactions and laws and orders and, right, thermodynamics and all of these laws, all of that is in you. That knowledge is in you, but what? In potential. When the dream comes, then what happened to that potential? It converted into manifest, okay? So this means that even knowledge depends on this final reality, which is sat and chit. So only in reference to the manifest world, you can say, yes, the all knowledge is there, but even all knowledge has a resolution. So what is the one thing that's truly always there? It's sat and chit. Everything other than sat and chit goes like this, right? Manifests, resolutes, constantly like this. Srishti, sthiti, pralaya. Srishti, creation, sthiti, sustenance, pralaya, dissolution, right? Like that, beginningless time. Okay, so what we're showing here is, yes, this intelligence is absolutely needed. In fact, you need this intelligence to grow. You need this intelligence to prosper in life, right? So now, it's kind of unfortunate that in these kind of pseudo spiritual teachings, they completely strip out the intelligence factor and they just say, just focus on sat and chit. But you cannot get to sat and chit because there's a world confronting you, right? There's a world that in whom you are always participating. You're always dealing with forms. You're always talking about forms, right? So there's nothing but forms here. And the only way to arrive to sat-chit is how? Through forms. Because the truth of every form, as you go smaller and smaller and smaller, right? So what, right? So what? Cup, and then you go ceramic, and then you go earth, and then you go molecules, and then atom, and then particles, and then what? Concept, and then concept, right? And then concept relies on awareness of the concept. In fact, let me backtrack that. You go into molecule. Now, molecule, atom, right? It needs intelligence, right? But intelligence depends on existence. And that's why we say sat and chit is the final reality. Because if you don't know this, that's called being an eternal seeker. What's the final reality? Have I found that final reality? Am I in touch with the final reality? So when the teacher finally comes and says the final reality is that into which everything resolves, including knowledge. Everything depends, including knowledge. And there's nothing but that final reality, sat and chit, which attains as different forms, attains as different names and forms, different forms with a different name. There's nothing but that final reality, including you, the listener, including the teacher, just different names, different forms. Then what is there to sort of look for? What is there to look for other than what you're already surrounded by? You're already surrounded by, you're already swimming in the final reality as the final reality. So it's like, hey, I want to find the final reality away from my body. Why? Your body exists, right? Your body, and wherever there's existence, that is the final reality. You might as well just go and start worshiping a wall. You don't even need Shiva or Vishnu. These are wonderful things. It depends on the characters, right? What you kind of relate with. That's why we have different figures in this world. Why so many figures? Because we have different personalities. Some of us want a more feminine deva, so we need Saraswati, because I value the knowledge in the form of that one who gives me, the one that represents knowledge, Saraswati. Some of us are more kind of, we don't need any of this. We say, well, I'm going to worship a wall. Where is it? In Jerusalem, right? They have a wall, right? Look at this. This is how it gets throughout the culture. They literally look at the wall. There's nothing wrong or right about it. It just shows you how this worship of this intelligence is everywhere in different shapes and forms, manifesting in these forms of prayers and behaviors and so on. But it's all in the name of one intelligence that's manifesting, whose truth is none other than existence and awareness.
Explain nirguna, attributelessness.
Okay. Look at the water, for example. Does the water have any attributes? Now, before you answer that, look at this. The water is able to manifest as a tall wave, as a small wave, as a violent wave, as a playful wave, as a kind of a tiny wave, as a huge 40-foot or 50-meter wave, right? So look at how many forms the water is able to manifest in the ocean. Why is it able to manifest as all of these forms? Because water itself doesn't have the attributes of tallness. Water itself doesn't have the attributes of 10 centimeters or 1 meter or 1 foot or 1 kilometer. Because water doesn't have attributes, water is capable of manifesting as all sorts of different forms, which we then give names to. Okay? So like that which is attributeless is capable of lending itself, of manifesting as endless forms, to which we give names to, of course. Why? Because it itself is nirgunam. It doesn't have attributes of its own. When you say limitless, it means it's capable of manifesting as anything without taking those attributes on its own. The water never takes on the attribute of tallness. Because if it did, if water in the ocean took on 1 meter attribute, then what does this mean? No wave in the ocean would ever be more or less than 1 meter. So just the fact that water is able to take on different forms means that water itself is free of all attributes. So like that, sat-chit is nirgunam. Therefore, you can have existence at the level of the table. You can have existence at the level of the wood, existence at the level of the atom, at the level of the particle. So all of them are what? Borrowing existence, but existence is not stuck onto any one of them. Therefore, when we say chit, it obtains as the knower, right? The I sense, the knower. It obtains as the object, now why, and it obtains as, we said, the means of knowledge. So pramata, the knower, the prameya, the object, and the means of knowledge, the pramana. Means of knowledge just meant that when you look at an empirical object in this world, that object represents in your mind as a vritti jnanam, knowledge of that object takes place, and the content of that object, of this cup, in my mind right now is nothing but consciousness, because I am aware of this cup. So therefore, so in other words, the whole content of all of your thoughts is nothing but consciousness. Do you understand what this means? When I say the content of all of your thoughts is consciousness. let me just backtrack, because some people probably say, I don't kind of understand this. Suppose I say to you, the content of your thought is consciousness, and you're kind of like, can you give me some rope? Can you give me some clarification? Okay, does your thought exist? If I say elephant, think of an elephant. So just the fact that I'm able to see an elephant, right? There's a picture of an elephant. Just the fact that it exists, right, implies that that's exactly where also consciousness is. So if you don't quite understand how is this now thought in my mind filled up by consciousness, it doesn't matter. You just say the thought exists. It's good as that. You don't have to analyze it further, because we said that wherever there's existence, existent thought, that's exactly where consciousness is. So we don't have to go, oh, but I cannot understand. How is my thought consciousness? You know, my thought is just a thought. Hey, the thought exists. That's good enough. Okay. Yeah, you know, sometimes we don't have to kind of go make it so complex, right? Very simple. And then, you know, in the background, your mind will, you know, slowly understand this deeper and deeper and deeper. So we don't have to give ourselves so much pressure. Okay. And the content of this consciousness is obtaining in the 3 periods of time, because wherever there is existence, there was existence yesterday, there's existence today, and there will be existence tomorrow. And what happens when the earth blows up? Suppose a big meteor comes. Is existence gone? No. The sun still exists. The planet still exists. And what happens when the whole universe resolves? Is the existence gone? Where is it going to go? Out of existence? If it goes out of existence, that means there's another kind of a big sack waiting. Hey, come to me. Well, that means the sack exists, right? So it cannot say things went out of existence. Anandaha kaha, sukha swarupa. What is ananda? It is in the form of fullness. There is a word and a place for happiness, but that has to be put in the right context. So the nature of sat and chit is fullness. Now, in our tradition, when we say the word ananda, actually a more appropriate word is anantam. That's why they have satyam, jnanam, anantam. Anantam specifically means limitless or infinity. So the real meaning of this word ananda, when it's next to sat and chit, is actually ananta. What does the word limitless mean? No boundaries or barriers?
No attributes.
Infinity?
No beginning, no ending.
Fulfillment.
Endless possibilities.
Endless.
Continuity.
Vast.
I'm
All
looking
pervading bliss.
Bliss will have a specific context.
Channel?
There's actually only one proper definition that you can give without starting this whole discussion, because every one of these words can, can open up a lot of sort of, cans of discussions. When we say limitless, it means it's not two. If sat and chit and time were two different things, because I said time and space and objects is, right, you cannot think of anything outside time, space, and objects. And the truth of time, space, and objects is sat and chit. Now, suppose there were two. What would that mean?
It's divided.
It's divided. And then, of course, now what is the in-between divider, right? Who created that? In dividing what within space, right? So who created space, right? So we're going to kind of a logical, right, fallacies. But if time, space, and objects and sat and chit were two different things, that means that they would limit each other. So this means, look at this, even if someone used eternal, infinity, right? All of these words were there. Suppose you have something that's really, really, really vast. Someone said vast also. And you take one little dot out of this vastness. That whole vastness becomes what? Limited. Even if it's so vast, the fact that I've just taken one little ant, one little dot, one atom out of that vastness, instantly that vastness is no longer called vast. It's limited. It's limited by what? It's limited by the atom. And the atom is limited by the vastness. So they're in the same pickle, right? They're in the same spot now. So limitless is that which is without a second. The question is, if there is no two things in existence, why do we see two things?
They're just appearances, just names and forms.
If there is only one reality, right, why do I see many? Why do I operate as if there's many? Why do I talk about and get kind of, spend my whole life investigating hundreds upon hundreds of different forms as if they are absolutely real? Why?
Is it because I see myself as different?
You see yourself as different from the very forms that you're looking at. And you see not only that, but you see the forms different from each other, right? This is why the biologist wants to look at the cells and the scientist wants to look at the particles, right? So they all look at it as different forms, which is okay. See, the reason is because we actually talked about this lack of knowledge, lack of satya mithya understanding. So what is satya? Satya means that which is independent. It's an independent existence. So this means it doesn't depend on anything else other than itself, right? And mithya is what enjoys what for its existence to be, it depends on something else. So mithya has a dependent existence on satyam. And we said that this mithya isn't something that you can call and brush off as an illusion, because see, there's a big difference between when I say something that is completely false and something that is partially false. There's a huge difference between these two terms. If I say that something is completely false, that's like saying what? Snake. I see the snake on the rope, right? There's absolutely no snake there whatsoever, but I see it. So in that sense, it's completely false. But to say that the world is completely false, that's not, you can't do that, because the world is publicly shared amongst all human beings. If I see a tree, you also see a tree. The third person also sees a tree. So in that sense, it has some reality, but you cannot kind of brush it off as a completely false reality. As if I was looking at that tree and I saw money, because I see these apples and I see how I can make a lot of money, right, from selling them on the market, and you're sort of you see the tree. So now mithya has this what we call in-between existence, which is it's neither completely true nor is it completely false. It's somewhere in between, right? So this has to be understood, because it can have a vast implication. It can be a matter of kind of saying the world is just an illusion and the world has nothing for me here. It's just sort of stay away from the world, right? Stay away from the world. Just by not understanding the right definition of the world, the status that the world enjoys, it can have drastic changes in one's life. It can have the difference between rushing out of home and kind of, being a recluse, or being within this world and understanding no matter where I go, it's mithya. It has neither absolute reality, nor does it have complete reality of its own. My home is mithya. Himalaya mountains is also mithya. So what better am I going to get at the Himalaya mountain than I'm going to get right here, right now? That's what I'm talking about, vast implications. So how do you appreciate that this world, that the existence is mithya? How do you appreciate that all that is here that you observe is actually mithya, that's resolvable into the final satyam? So if I say cup, for example, you say it's what is this? Ceramic. Okay, I say this is cup. You say this is ceramic. They're both true, right? This is a cup. This is also, because it's made out of ceramic. But look at this. They're both true. But what if I put one extra word? Are they equally true? Which one's, oh, let me put it this way. Which one's more true? The cup or the ceramic? Which one is more true?
Ceramic.
The dependent existence.
Good. So ceramic is therefore more true. Suppose you say the cup is more true. Okay, then I'm just going to take out the ceramic. Where's your cup now? Okay, or maybe a better example is this little container, plastic, because it's bendable. You say container or plastic, which is more true? Now, suppose you say it's, you know, the container. Okay, so suppose I take the plastic. Where's your container now? Right, gone. But suppose I say what's more true? I say the plastic is more true. So this means that even if I get rid of this container, as I'm going to do, is this still a container? No, it's not. It's something totally different. The container is gone, but what's still true? The plastic is still true. So in that sense, when I say, you know, when we say mithya, what is more true? It is that which this depends upon. So it's not like we're eliminating the container, because the container still has a valid use. It can hold water, it has a functional use and so on, but its use depends on satyam, which is the plastic. So now, where is this container? Is it above the plastic? Is it below the plastic? Is it next to the plastic? In fact, the question itself doesn't make sense. In fact, the entirety of this container is nothing but what? The plastic. So it's not above the plastic. It's not below the plastic. It's not kind of, you know, my reality is above me. My reality is what? Below me. My reality is in the Himalaya mountains. My reality is in India. My reality is not in Australia. It's in India. That's where the rishis are, right? Wherever you find the form, that's exactly where you find satyam. So at the same time, this satyam, this plastic, never takes on the attributes of the container. Because if the plastic took on the attributes of the container, then, you know, if I go like this, right, then I would never be able to go like this, because this is not a container anymore. So in that same way, all of the things that you've ever done, right, like all of your punya papam, all of your sort of, you know, merits and noble actions and ignoble actions, all of that, has that actually ever changed you, sat and chit? Has it actually ever changed you? See what I'm getting at? So sat and chit, if all that is here is sat and chit, and everything is just a name and form, including the body that did all of those actions, that acquired all of that punya papam onto itself. If there's nothing but sat and chit, so then where's the question of now saying, oh, you know, I've got, I need to come back and sort of like, you know, continue kind of exhausting my, you know, desires and freeing myself and learning about new things and all. You see where the identity is placed? It's placed in what? The container. But the truth of the container is always that which is free of the attributes of the container. Therefore, that which is satyam is always free of the mithya. At the same time, it lends itself and allows all forms to exist. It allows the container to exist. It allows this little funny thing to exist. It allows everything to exist, but it remains completely free of the smallness, of the bigness, of the intelligence, of the silliness, of the ignobleness, of the nobleness. It remains completely free of all of the attributes that are superimposed on this existence awareness. Therefore, there's no such thing as, oh, you know, I have this whole karmic account, you know, my causal body is, you know, full of these, you know, unmanifest karmas, and I have to go through this. This is only true if you understand yourself as a human being. When you hear the teaching, you understand, hey, all that is here is this one without a second. And this one without a second never takes on the attributes of anyone or anything at any time, not in the past, not in the present, not in the future. That remains completely free as itself, as the limitless one. Therefore, there is nothing that you know, that I have done. There's nothing that I have not done. I was completely free all along. But owing to my ignorance, my eye was placed where? Where was my plastic? Me as the plastic. Suppose I'm the plastic. Where was I the plastic placed in? In that which is constantly kind of, you know, acquiring, doing in this world, acquiring punya papam. So this plastic dies, right? In this name and form dies, and then a new one appears, right? And therefore it carries itself as an individual person. It carries itself as an individual person. So what Vedanta does is it helps you to free your eye, to free the plastic, by simply changing the focus by understanding, yes, there is an incidental body, there is an incidental mind and an incidental life, and there are different, things that I've done and not done, but it's just incidental. It's dependent. When I say incidental, I mean it's dependent on this existence, but the existence doesn't take on any attributes of whatever this form has done, or whatever attributes it's enjoying. So this means we don't have to go looking for a reality outside of your body. You don't have to go to a meditation, to kind of go into some special experience and find yourself there. Tell me, where is existence not? Where is existence not? When are you not conscious? That's all Vedanta wants to show you. There's nothing more than just existence and awareness. That is it. It's the final reality. There's nothing more to it. Now, what happens is the mind, right, that is not quite ready, it wants to now say, no, I don't accept that. It's got to be something huge, right? So in that case, it wants to make it into a different experience. And therefore, it's very hard to kind of get to this person. So you have to wait it out. You have to let that mind come back down to earth and sort that whole, that whole notion out. Okay. Therefore, do you understand now what it means when we say, even though there's only one, we see the many, but actually the many all collapse into the one? Because the original question was, if there's only one, why do I see two? Owing to this satya mithya ignorance. I don't know the satya mithya relationship between different objects at whatever level you're at, from the smallest to the biggest, and what is the final reality upon which they all depend. That's why. So it's not like the wise person sees one. They still see the many, like anyone else. But through cognitive knowledge, you understand, despite me seeing the world, it all resolves into all knowledge power, and all knowledge power ultimately has dependence on existence and awareness. Okay, now, someone
Can
used
I ask?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I can understand that what you're explaining, but do we at some stage actually see everything as one?
You
Or
understand?
the rishis, do they actually see everything as one?
When you say see, do you mean like with your physical senses?
Visually, yes.
You see it cognitively. You don't see it actually cognitively. That means through understanding. Like, just like, excellent question. Just like this. Forget about Vedanta right now. Let's go into something more relatable. A scientist goes to a class of seeing that the whole world is cognitively understanding the whole world is atoms, right? That's a fact. It's just atoms upon atoms. When they go back into the real world, do they physically see atoms? No, but they cognitively understand whatever I see, the truth of that which I see is atoms. So Vedanta goes one step further. Yeah, atoms are there, but atoms require knowledge to exist, and knowledge requires existence and awareness, because you cannot work with knowledge unless it's within the presence of a conscious being. Therefore, the answer is no, you don't see with your senses, but cognitively you do see.
Okay, thanks.
Someone said the word ananda, bliss, right? Okay. So let's not put this word away, because you will see this word bliss used. The question is, now let me just point out the flaw. If you use the word bliss, what kind of flaws happen? And if you type in sat-chit-ananda into Google, you will basically see existence, consciousness, bliss almost, right? What, 90% of the time, right? And this is very confusing, and it can take a person off a tangent. That's why a teacher is required to explain these words. So suppose you say that ananda means bliss. The question is, why do they associate the word bliss to sat and chit? One of them is anandamaya kosha. Remember anandamaya kosha, the three types of happiness, priya, moda, pramoda? Now that's experiential happiness. That's no doubt. That's a fact. It's experiential happiness. So now when you take this word ananda and you drop it into a context like sat and chit, there's this tendency to kind of overlap and say, so sat and chit is not priya, moda, pramoda, but sat and chit is mega pramoda, mega moda, right? It's like the ultra moda. It's like the ultimate fourth level, unbeatable, unparalleled type of bliss. So there's a natural tendency to overlap what I've heard with Anandamaya, and therefore to take that bliss, that happiness, and pass it on into sat and chit. Okay, now let's look at this. If suppose you say that this ananda in the reference to sat and chit is bliss, like experiential bliss, what does this imply? Suppose sat and chit, existence awareness, is bliss, like experiential bliss.
That it's a limited experience. It sort of reduces it to a limited experience.
Good. Because obviously a kid's going to experience so much. An old person, who's barely breathing is going to only experience so much ananda. So someone's going to experience so much ananda. But what else? If listen to the question. If sat and chit is the content of all that is, and that sat and chit is experiential bliss, that experiential bliss is not here now, what does that mean? I'm putting sat and chit into the future. Okay, but we said that sat is that which obtains in the 3 periods of time. So this means if ananda in the context of sat and chit means experiential bliss, and I am not experiencing that right now, then that means that sat and chit is not here right now. But that's a total contradiction of your experience, because everything exists and there is constant awareness. We all have consciousness. We all enjoy consciousness. Okay, that's the first problem. The second problem is, look at this. If the characteristic, because Nitin said nirgunam. Now suppose you give this sat and chit a guna, right? A saguna. You give it an attribute. And one of the attributes that you give to sat and chit is bliss. What does that mean? That means that everything should be blissed out right now. The ant colony should be blissed out. The bees should be blissed out. A depressed person should be blissed out. Right? Every living being, a bacteria should be blissed out. Everything should be just, blissed out completely. This is the problem. The moment you add experience onto ananda in reference to sat and chit, these two problems come. And then you have to now create these imaginary ways to solve out of it, right? But that's just a whole load of, can of worms you're opening up now. Therefore, the only possible explanation that you can attribute to ananda is anantam, limitless. Okay, that which has no attributes, which is capable of manifesting as anything, but never takes on the attributes of anything. Why is the word ananda used then? Can't just discard it, because why don't they say sat-chit-anantam, right? Why is sat-chit-ananda used? Well, for obvious reasons. Suppose someone who's looking for this truth, are they going to relate to the word limitless? Limitless. No. You need something tangible. You need something graspable. Everyone relates to happiness. So, the rishis have thought this through. We need to motivate the seeker. I don't want to just give you limitless. Well, what's limitless? What's infinity? It has no context to me. Well, you're going to get a lot of happiness. Okay, this I can relate with. Let's go. Give me the teaching, right? That's one reason. But let's go into a little more serious inquiry. These little anandas that you experience here and there, little happinesses, the experiential happinesses, what is the source of them? Is it an object? Is the source of that happiness an object? No, because if it was, then tomorrow, the moment you see that object, it will give you the exact same guaranteed happiness. Is it time, like 3:30 p.m. or whatever, 6 o'clock? No, because whenever it's 3:30 p.m., you would have instantly ananda, right? That would be great. Is it a place? Like, a beach. It's the beach. That means the moment you put your feet from the cement onto the sand, instantly your face goes from like this to like that, right? Instantly. That's not the case. Is it your senses? Are they the source of ananda, happiness? Your eyes, capacity to hear and capacity to see? No. Because suppose I put you in a very quiet place, like a cave, and you don't hear anything. What are you going to be saying? Can you just give me something to hear? Right? Give me some music. If it was your senses, you wouldn't need objects. So it's not an object. The source is not time. The source is not place. The source is not senses. Is it thoughtlessness? Is the source of Ananda thoughtlessness? This is Patanjali Yoga Sutra, right? Samadhi, and you will experience Ananda. Because there are people who have a lot of thoughts and they are blissed out. They're very happy. And there are people who have thoughtlessness and they're like, get me out of here. You know, I don't want this thoughtlessness. Give me something beautiful to think about. It's much more interesting than thoughtlessness. What is Ananda? What is this happiness? Like, how does it occur? And what Vedanta says is, when the seeker, the insistent seeker, the one who's got rules, what needs to happen, the one's got desires, the one's got a narrative going on, here's what needs to happen, here's how things need to be, here's how people need to act towards me, here's how much money I need to get or make per year, here's the status that I need in the society, here's how much respect I need to get from people, here's how people need to greet me, here's how kind of, I want the society to look at me. All of these rules, so many rules, this insistent wanter has, they stand in the way of Ananda. They stand in the way of their natural happiness that children enjoy all the time. Why do children enjoy happiness naturally? Because their wanter is still being developed. They don't have so many wants. That insistent voice is not there so much. So that you have to do something to displease them. Whereas with adults, you have to do something to please the adult. With the children, it's opposite. And as the child develops this wanter, more wants, they see in the world, I need this, I need a girl, I need a car, I need this. All of these become narratives now. And they start to take away and strip out that Ananda, that natural happiness of yours. And we all experience this. I remember when I was young, I was just so happy. All the time, happy. Most of the time, happy. By the time I was 15, right, when the hormones start to come and so on, I don't have the girl anymore. I'm not happy. Gone. Right? So the wanter starts to develop and develop and develop and develop and develop, and so large it blocks out. Now, what happens is when this wanter gets the object, what happens? The wanter temporarily subsides, goes to sleep for a moment. And what happens then? You experience this Ananda, this natural happiness. And this natural happiness is a manifestation of limitlessness. Just a little glimpse. You get in touch with your limitlessness. Just like, for example, a mirror that is reflective in nature, and it's covered with dust. Okay? And the sun is shining on the mirror. And just for a moment, you remove that dust, and what happens? You see this beautiful ray of the sun. The reflection of the sun shines at you, and you look, wow, the sun is so beautiful, right? And you enjoy for a moment. You got kind of forget about your problems because the light is just grabs you. It grabs you. And then what happens? The dust comes back onto the mirror, right? Onto the mind. And then the sun, that natural joy of being, the natural joy of being, it goes away. And then again, the wanter goes away, like removing dust from the mirror. Again, you see the expression of yourself, that which is bright, shines in all its glory, it shines. And you're like, wow, I want this to last. And then again, dust comes on. Now, how is the seeker sought resolved permanently in moksha? Because that's what moksha is. The seeker sought, this insistent seeker is gone completely. It's not a small thing. It's gone completely. How is it gone completely? It's not gone as in, because that's called destruction of ego. Your ego never really leaves. But we say it's gone. But what do we mean when we say it's gone? The seeker sought is gone. How does moksha take care of this permanently? Cognitively, I understand that the truth of the seeker and the truth of the object is both sat and chit. They're just obtaining a different form. There's an Andre form and there's an object form. But the truth of Andre is sat and chit. The truth of that object over there is sat and chit. It's a cognitive thing. That's it. It's not experiential. As though in me there is this seeker, in me there is this sought. In me there is a wanter, in me there is a wanted. Therefore, what am I chasing? What am I looking for? I'm just looking for more plastic over there. You know, maybe a kind of a sexy plastic, but it's plastic. It's a cognitive understanding. The one who is seeking and that which is sought, the truth of both is nothing but sat and chit, existence awareness. Therefore, it offloads this pressure to go into the world and get this which is so beautiful. And it is beautiful, no doubt. That's a natural program. But there's a cognitive wisdom. There's a wisdom there. It's like in a dream. You project this dream and you identify with one character in this dream. And this character, you say I. And this I now goes and looks for something in this world, in your world, looks for an object. And this I, this little character in your dream, says, I am now happy that I have joined with this object. And they say, this happiness belongs to me. Does it really belong to them? No, it belongs to you, the one from whom this entire world comes. The I in that little dream with whom you have identified is nothing but you. The object in that dream, your dream, is nothing but you. Cognitively, I understand. The I is me, the object is also me. Anandaha kaha sukha swarupa. So it is in the nature of fullness. When this fullness manifests in your body, in your mind, it's experienced as joy. It's just a little glimpse of your true nature. In conclusion, evam sat-chit-ananda swarupam swatmanam vijaniyat. Thus, one should know oneself to be the nature of existence, consciousness, fullness. One person in Vedanta who is very sophisticated asked me this question. He said, I understand awareness, but I'm not quite clear on this sat. How do I know? Why don't I see sat unlike in a glass? Like if I say whatever, like, right? Glass, right? When I say glass is this is qualified is or unqualified is? Qualified is means it's, right? It's superimposed by something. Unqualified is means it is pure existence without any superimpositions. So if I say glass is that pure existence, unqualified existence, or is that qualified or superimposed existence? Superimposed existence. It's glass existence. Then we got ceramic existence. Then we've got atom existence. So no matter how deep you go, it's almost like every one of them is qualified by something. So what the fella asked me is, how do I recognize this unqualified pure existence? The answer is you can't see existence in any given object. The only place where you can understand this existence is where? In your buddhi as the self-evident I. Through inquiry, you release the sat and chit from its self-imposed limitations through inquiry, and you align it to the original definition of I. That requires contemplation. That requires thinking. This is not an abstract inquiry where I am a small individual over here and there is sat-chit over there, and I have to kind of find that tomorrow. I have to find that tomorrow. What we're talking about is right here, right now. It's an inquiry. It's simply pointing out, bringing out what is true here and now. It's not a belief system. It's not something that you can't prove, like heaven. It's something that it's in your direct experience, and it's to be understood as not an intellectual concept. Look at this. Suppose I say to you, you have a hair, you have two eyes, you have a nose. Does that sound intellectual to you? Why not? Because you know those are facts. Those are facts about you as a person. But then, look at this. But then when I say you are existence awareness, unqualified by anything, nothing sticks onto you. Oh, that's intellectual. What does this reveal? The person who said that is not quite connecting to themselves. You can see where the identity is placed. It's more placed in the body because you feel comfortable. You have a nose, you have thoughts, you have concerns, you have anxieties. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, this is very true. But when I say who you really are, you're sat and chit, that's intellectual. Therefore, it shows us the moment we say it's intellectual, it sounds like I'm talking about something else, because you don't say intellectual to things that are you say intellectual to things that are not you. If it sounds intellectual, that is not the teacher's fault, that is not the teaching's fault, that is not the pramana's fault, that is not the lineage's fault. In fact, it's not anyone, that's not even to use the word fault. It just shows you that there's some work to do. It cannot be intellectual. We're talking about you.
I was just going to say it's just removing the ignorance of what already is. So just the knowledge, understanding, it's just removing that ignorance. But I think a lot of the time people are chasing an experience and they're looking for that nirvikalpa samadhi, removing like what you were saying before, the mind from any kind of that's the yoga sort of thing. They're trying to remove the mind, like no mind type thing, and they think that's what it is, but it's only an experience.
Yeah, and if the mind was, if you remove your thoughts, right, then when your thoughts come back, then you should go out of existence. Because if you're chasing for thoughtlessness, and that is who you are, your thoughtlessness, then when thoughtlessness goes away, I should go away. But that's not the case. I'm, very much here during thoughts. I'm very much there during thoughtlessness. So Vedanta is, again, it's not criticizing yoga. Yoga, and I've done yoga many years, and I appreciate it so much because it's a wonderful mind purifier. So we have to look at it as a means of purifying and readying up yourself, your mind. But it cannot take you to moksha. For that, Vedanta is required. Nitin, any luck?
I was just going to say the state of moksha. Now, it sounds very nice. Is it going to be an attitude of mind because you are converting this, the way you are relating to this little I, to that higher I, which is that self? To make this attitude, but how do you make that as a permanent?
Yeah, initially you hear the knowledge, right, Nitin? Initially you hear the knowledge, just like quantum physics, you hear it initially. But isn't it true that when you walk out of the class and you start to think about it, you grab the piece of paper and you read and you follow up on your notes and you just sort of reflect upon what you heard, slowly, it becomes part of you. It becomes a reality. The distance between that knowledge becomes closer and closer and closer and closer until eventually it's inseparable from you. That's why we have not only shravanam, listening, but we have mananam, obstacle removal, which is what you're doing now. You're removing doubts, but also you have nididhyasanam. You have contemplation and meditation. So don't worry about the whole thing. How do I make it permanent? That comes through. It's a growing clarity. We have to remove this idea of Buddha sitting underneath a bodhi tree, meditating for a couple of hours, and then, next morning you wake up enlightened. This is strongly ingrained in the society. And I guess the first step is just getting away from these notions that don't help you and add a lot of pressure. And I had them too, trust me. One of the notions that I had was, enlightenment is I'm going to totally lose the sense of individuality. I'm just going to walk out the door. I'm going to leave my business behind. I'm not going to care who my parents are. And then I thought, but I can't do that. This is terrible. This is a bad person. I'm not this person. And therefore, I was afraid. I was afraid of this knowledge because I didn't have a teacher. But you can see how powerful this was, this notion that, right? And then when you find a teacher, they just remove all of this nonsense and you realize you're not losing anything, you're gaining everything. That's the beauty. You're not losing anything, you're gaining everything. There's no question of loss. Just having clarity.
So you don't need to run off to a forest or a cave. But the funny thing is, ironically, you need life, samsara, to have these experiences, to put yourself back into that reality.
That's true. And that is why we don't dismiss the world in Vedanta. The world is there to mature you, to add context. to this teaching, right? If we don't have context, then it's just intellectual. It just stays at the intellectual level. This is why I love people when they're engaged in the world and they, challenges. They give you so much test. They really see where you stand in reference to this knowledge. Yeah, so the world is wonderful. It educates you. It offers you opportunity to clarify your doubts, to see where you stand. How firm you are in this knowledge? When someone throws you off, how quickly do you come back to your center? How much those thoughts ruminate with you, and what kind of thoughts do you have about them? Do you kind of apply some what we call in Gita pratipaksha bhavana? Do you find the positive in a person, or do you just stay with the negative aspects of a person? All of this reveals your maturity. Okay, next session is how did this world come about? Because we've only covered what? Self. What about the world? How do I explain away the objects? Let's talk about that next week.
Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.